Hi everyone, so my name is Harvey Kennedy. I'm the CEO and founding director of Black Beetle Health. We have a really exciting sort of event planned for you tonight in webinar format. It will be led by and hosted by Philippa Pert, who's a doctoral student at University of Wolverhampton, focusing on sort of looking at mental health issues for minority groups such as Black and Asian and other minoritized ethnic groups. Just trying to understand some of the factors affecting these groups within those groups who identify as sort of a queer, trans, intersex people of colour. So we'll be touching on as many points as we can tonight. We're keeping it short out of respect for those who, like myself, who have a lower capacity for sort of screens and Zoom at this time. But we understand this is quite an important topic to discuss. We want to make it available. So as a sort of CEO and founding director of Black Beetle Health, our goal is to really address misinformation in communities, to try and educate individuals from these underrepresented communities. Also, to ensure that we signpost people to the appropriate services, as opposed to just sort of sending people out there into the deep, the wide open ocean, but really sort of be quite targeted in what we're signposting to and services that we sort of stand by. And then, of course, encouraging people to become more empowered and informed decision makers instead of sort of guessing and feeling like they don't have a place to go. So that's Black Beetle Health. Over to you, Philippa.
Hello, everybody. My name is Philippa Peart. Welcome to the Minority Stress July series. I'm your host for this evening. I identify as she or her. I'm a mental health resource development officer. I'm currently a doctoral student at the University of Wolverhampton in the Faculty of Health, Education, and Wellbeing. My research is about mental health in Black and Asian communities in the UK. I am passionate about these issues affecting various minoritized groups. Thank you for joining me today, and let me introduce our guests. So today we have guest J Spy, singer, songwriter, and fashionista. J Spy, would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Oh yeah, fantastic. So thank you for having me, and it's great to be here with such amazing guests and yourself as a host. For anyone that doesn't know anything about me, I am a singer-songwriter and I'm also a bit of a presenter as well. I was a host on a Channel 4 show called Naked Beach, and that was all about helping people to learn to love themselves no matter what their shape or size. In my spare time, I'm also the showbiz correspondent for BBC Radio Manchester, and I like champion making people feel better about themselves, be that in forms of their mental health, be that in terms of accepting their blackness, and be that also in terms of making sure we're doing what we can online. So it's a great opportunity to be here today. We're going to be talking about stress, and I think it's such an important topic to cover, so thank you for having me.
Thank you, and that was J Spy. Now we have Adelaide Harris, practicing midwife and health education and resource development officer. Adelaide, would you like to tell us a bit about more yourself?
There we go, I've done it now, so no one else has to worry. So my name's Adelaide. I use she, her pronouns. Currently live in London, married to Catherine, my lovely wife. I'm an NHS midwife, and I work in a caseload in modular care, which is a social model that allocates sort of a named midwife and a buddy midwife to a family throughout the childbearing continuum. My kind of interests lie in sort of challenging perceptions around care for marginalised groups. So that primarily has been sort of LGBT groups. Obviously I'm a Black woman, so that informs my interests, and also around body weight stigma, which is perpetuated within healthcare settings, particularly. So that's me.
Thank you, Adelaide. And now we have Louis Alexander, specializes in psychology and is an upcoming counselor. Louis, would you like to tell us more about yourself?
Yeah, so I am Louis Alexander. I use he, him pronouns. I don't know if you can hear me because my internet's a little bit crappy at the moment. But yeah, I'm the Health Education and Resource Development Officer at Black Beetle Health. My day job, I work for a private healthcare company, assisting patients with any of their healthcare needs. Obviously, my background is in psychology. I did my master's degree in psychology. Part of my dissertation was to look at drug addiction in the LGBT community and how coming into recovery has shaped their lives. Some of the other work that I have done, I've worked in a drug and alcohol reform centre with patients, helping them rehabilitate themselves, as well as helping setting up a gay men's wellness and support group as well, where gay men could come together and share their experiences and talk about various issues. So that's me. Do I need to say anything else?
Thank you, Lewis. That was great. And now, last but not least, we have Lewis Mills, Resource Development Officer. Would you like to tell us more about yourself, Lewis?
Yes, so it's Lewis. My pronouns are he, him. I am a psychological wellbeing practitioner, so full-time. So that basically means that I help people with anxiety, depression, and panic attacks, and I kind of get them back on the straight and narrow, which is really nice. I'm similar in the sense with Lewis Alexander. I have a history with psychology as well. I did my master's in psychology last year, and my thesis was around minority stress for gay Black men. So that's going to be, you know, very convenient now. But yeah, this is my first time ever being on a panel, I think. So yeah, I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you for introducing yourself. Those were our guest panelists for this evening. Today we'll be discussing minority stress in the QTIPOC communities, especially in the QTIPOC communities. Q for queer, T for transgender, I for intersex, POC is for people of color. Minority stress is described as chronically high levels of stress faced by members of stigmatized minority groups, particularly of those in the QTIPOC communities. This can include certain factors in social oppression. It comes in many forms and it takes a toll on the health of individuals. Indeed, disparities in mental health and physical health outcomes have been well documented among oppressed populations, including racial and ethnic minority and sexual minorities. For example, sexual minorities individuals are at high risk of mental health disorders, including depression, anxiety, substance use disorder, as well as suicide. These disparities are often linked to stressful experience of stigma and discrimination that accompany a minority social identity. So today we'll be discussing minority stress as a factor within QTIPOC mental health and well-being, to shed light on the unique personal and professional barriers faced by queer, transgender, intersex, Black and or Indigenous people of colour in the UK, particularly during this difficult time, as I'm sure everybody's, you know, having stressful times, being stuck in the house, which I know is very terrible. I'm going through the same thing. So, but normally where I come from, I'm someone from Jamaica. We don't really have issues around minority stress regarding the color of our skin, but there are huge problems in the communities of Jamaica for the QTIPOC communities, such as homophobia and stigmatized attitudes. And other countries such as West and East Africa and Southern Asia, there are also minority stress related issues for the QTIPOC communities. I personally never come across issues regarding this color of my skin till I actually came to the UK. That's when I even actually learned about racism. And when I experienced it, I have to say it was a very stressful time for me, as in I walked in the workplace and I could just tell that I am different by the way everybody's attitudes, the way I'm looked at, the way people speak to me, and the fact that I was always called in the office all the time. So that was very stressful, and it caused me to feel a bit down as well, which had a lot of effect on my mental health. But I came through it, but there's still issues that need to be addressed, such as minority stress in the color of minority stress due to the color of my skin. But we should dig deeper into exploring this issue in the QTIPOC communities. Here I have a panel of guests who have experiences in their professional and personal lives. We have Jay Sky. Jay Sky, are you there? Are you still with us?
I'm with you, girl.
Thank you. So I would like to ask, what do you believe the single greatest cause of mental health is in people of colour? Or is this further complicated for QTIPOC?
Oh gosh, that's a great question to start with. There's a lot to unpack with what you've said and your experience. I'm sorry that it's been the way it is. It's not nice that we do have these experiences where we're not treated in a way which is fair or equal. And for me, it's all about finding your power in that situation. And whenever I've felt like I've not been an equal or where a situation's not been fair, it's because that individual has been made to feel like they have no value. So a lot of things that I'm doing, especially during lockdown, to ensure that my mental health is okay and that I've got the tools to be able to handle stress, is to give myself new skills. So there's a lot of free courses online. I think the Open University website has over 160 courses you can do online. So that's a good way to upskill. Podcasts are a great way to keep that conversation going in a direction which benefits your own mental health as well. I'm a very creative person, so I've found ways to record at home and to get my creative juices going. But if anyone is feeling like that, they cannot cope, things like this Zoom conversation, you guys are experts in this field, so let people reach out to you. Check out the Black Beetle website, and there are ways where you can get the stress and use it as a tool to better your life and to improve the environment around you. And it just starts with that conversation that you have with yourself.
Okay, brilliant. Did you go out in social events and activities to help you with such stress that you were going through?
For me personally, before lockdown, I did have counselling, and then I was lucky enough to be on a TV show where I, in effect, became the counsellor for people that were dealing with other issues. And I think in terms of dealing with your own self-esteem, sometimes it's a result of us focusing too much on being in a victim mindset. And when you help other people through their own situations, that adds to your self-esteem too. So I find that doing charity work and being there for my family and lots of other things like that, I think that is a great way to build your resilience, to be able to not focus entirely on yourself as the issue and making yourself feel like there's no way out. But everyone's situation is different, obviously.
Yeah, that's brilliant, because I remember when I was going through such stresses at a particular workplace, I was volunteering for Terence Higgins Trust, and I felt that my skills was definitely improved, and I was talking to different people, get to know other people, and that helped with my mental health a lot, because when I went home, I had other things to think about. So I think that's a great example. Thank you. And we have Lewis. Lewis, are you there? Lewis Mills, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. Sorry, and there's two of us, so we're gonna have to start going on the last name basis at this point. Yes.
So tell me something, what are the main factors you think affect positive or negative mental health outcomes for QTIPOC? For example, POC communities, QTIPOC communities.
So I think in general, and it was something that came from my research when I did my master's, is around social support. Social support is a very big, powerful factor that reduces stress, and it also reduces the risk of stress becoming some sort of mental health challenge. So within the sort of QTIPOC community specifically, it's really helpful because of the way information is shared. Our way of accessing sexual health or mental health services isn't plastered on adverts, it's not plastered as much on social media. So being able to have a group or be familiar with people that are like you, that may share the same experiences, makes information flow a lot easier, and also just reduces stigma. Like, you know, I have friends who, TMI, go on my dating app, and they're always like, Lewis, I never see people that look like you, and things like that, things that we take for granted, something that I just don't even think of anymore. But for them, you know, it's something that is shocking. It's something that's notable, because it's true. Like, you have to be really careful with social support. So that's one positive aspect that I wanted to just share.
Oh, that's great. That's a great attitude to have. I guess I can only speak on my knowledge and what I know about my own country, Jamaica, which I know is a well-known island in the world. It's had a lot of influence. And I do think that the QTIPOC communities over there, it's highly stigmatized. I think there's no social groups, as people fear that if they come socially together, you might have a lot of negative response, as in they're putting their lives at risk. And I do think that's something that needs to be addressed. I think it's slowly starting to become addressed there, but not as fast as it should be. But it is slowly getting there. But I guess it's just, you know, educating people that they need to accept people for who they are. And by the end of the day, we're all human beings. So I think we will definitely go and probably talk more about that at the next series. And now we have Adelaide Harris. Adelaide, are you there?
I'm here.
Hello, Adelaide. So I would like to know, how might specializing in female mental health and female health in general, how might poor mental health present itself in expecting parents? Who does it affect the way in which people choose to access contraception and sexual and reproductive health services?
So I guess the question is twofold. So I'll actually start with the last part of your question, if that's okay, about how it might affect people accessing services. So the kind of things that you've talked about in relation to minority stress is just an added layer of things to think about when you're accessing care. And in terms of healthcare, whatever that might be, you're generally presenting yourself for support or help from the person that's in front of you. And so in terms of like the power paradigm, you're actually having to like take yourself and see somebody who has this kind of authority and present yourself to them. So what can really sort of affect people is their experiences. So there's been a couple of national surveys. There was one by Stonewall and one by the government in 2018, looking at LGBT people's experiences, and that was just generally, they didn't break down into ethnicity. What they were finding is that although most people were having positive interactions, actually there still were a selection of people that were having sort of negative reactions when they were contacting health professionals. And that's just accessing like general health. The kind of things that they talked about was sort of inappropriate curiosity, and also that people didn't have the knowledge about LGBT specific health. So and actually what's really interesting about that is that within sexual health, people have better responses as opposed to general health. And I think that for those of us, I wouldn't necessarily count myself as a sexual health professional, though I work in sort of sexual reproductive health. But for the sexual health professionals amongst you, you'll probably be much more clued up in terms of like pronouns and gender identity and things like that, particularly if you identify as a queer person. What that research also suggested was that transgender people have more contact with health professionals than cisgendered counterparts within the LGBT community. And again, quite a large number of those were avoiding seeking treatment because they were worried about the reaction that they were going to get. So that's just health in general before you kind of take into consideration. And so thinking about how that might impact on queer people in particular, and black or brown queer people. So a good example is what we know is that a lot of people aren't disclosing their orientation to their health professionals, and that can have quite significant implications further down the line. So if you're a transgender person who has a prostate and you've not disclosed to your professional that that is the case, actually you're kind of opening yourself up to potentially having complications for your health. So that's just kind of like in that little section. In relation to expectant parents, what we know is that sort of mental health does directly and strongly correlate with fear of childbirth, for example, and sort of fear or feeling unsupported in pregnancy, or rather feeling supported in pregnancy and labour is kind of directly linked with having sort of a more relaxed and less painful experience, and also a better postpartum experience, you know. And a lot of this is about experience, because for you know, part of minority stress is actually just the worry about the experience with the professional. It's like, what if this happens? And for some people, they have directly had transphobic or homophobic experiences, which is why they're carrying that. And for other people, it's just the feeling of, what if this happens? Because I know it does happen in general life. And then thinking about Black people within sort of maternity care, which obviously lots of people know about, that the death rate for Black women is 5 times higher than their white counterpart. Just knowing that figure and seeing that on the news already gives you a level of stress, thinking, okay, well, how is this going to affect my experience? So those are just a couple of the things. Hopefully that's kind of answered your question that you've asked.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Being a Black woman, and I've just hit 30, it does scare me to get pregnant and think about the trauma and even the death rate. Because I remember, I think you've been two influencers now that's been pregnant and they've actually died during childbirth. And it actually put a lot of fear in me as well, to think, is being a mother, is it for me? I know I want to be a mother, but do I actually want to go through that? Because I remember when I read something a long time ago, an article, I don't remember where it's from, where, you know, the white counterparts of people in the UK, they believe Black women, when they come in the hospital, they can handle the pain because they're strong. So they leave them, instead of giving them the appropriate care that they need. I think this was based in America, where Black women are more likely to be traumatized and feel more pain due to the stigma and the discrimination of the skin of our color, and how we are perceived across the media as very aggressive and very strong. So in their head, they think that we can handle this pain. Oh, she doesn't really need this much. Let's go to this, let's attend this other person, and we are left behind. So in a way, it does strike fear in me to even have a child, even though I would like to have one, but it's really like, I've literally shoved it in the back of my head, because I'm actually traumatized mentally of what could happen to me.
And that's a really perfect example, actually, of minority stress that you've just given there.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much. And now we have Louis Alexander. Louis, are you there?
I am indeed, yeah.
Hello, hello. And tell me, what changes are we likely to see with regards to substance misuse in the QTIPOC communities?
Okay, so I'm going to talk about like lockdown and stuff and how drug use has changed, but I think there has been studies to show that 30 to 60% of LGBT people deal with anxiety and depression throughout their life, and that's 1.5 to 2.5 times more higher than our counterparts, basically. And a third of adults who have a substance use disorder also experience depression. But there's not a lot of figures to show substance misuse in the QTIPOC community. I do feel that that's lacking, and I don't really know why. You know, could it be to do with shame and fear and stigma around like drug use and alcohol use, for example? We're not too sure. But there's definitely a cycle when it comes to drug use. You know, if you have anxiety, you may drink or you may use more to cope with that. Then you do things that you don't really want to do. You end up feeling shame, and to deal with that shame and that fear and be disgusted with yourself, you continue to use, and then it's just a cycle of addiction, basically. But I did read in an article that during the lockdown period, party drugs such as like cocaine or ecstasy is being used less because people weren't really going out much, but use of hardcore drugs such as crystal meth or GHB or even heroin and things like that on the increase, because people are now like staying indoors. Some of us, you know, are staying at home, not working, things like that. The way they cope with it is alcohol and drugs. And I know like there are some of my friends as well who are drinking more as well to cope with that uncertainty that's going on in their lives. So yeah, I definitely think that, you know, we need to check on how much we're drinking, how much we're using, things like that at this time. But yeah, there are also various places that people can visit that are free if they do have drug problems or alcohol problems. So they have places like NA, which is Narcotics Anonymous, and there are various LGBT specific Narcotics Anonymous groups that people can visit. There's also like female specific ones, also Black and ethnic minority groups that can help people facing those issues as well. So yeah. Okay,
thank you, Louise. Due to my experiences, I've had friends in the QTIPOC communities, and I remember I have this Caribbean friend, and he drinks a lot, like drugs. There's always marijuana. He's always drinking, and he's always, oh, Philippa, come join me. I'm thinking, oh, no, I can't, I have to study. And I think it's due to the fact that his family doesn't give him as much support as he would like, as in he had to go out on his own by the age of 18. They was really quick to kick him out. Even though he wanted to study, they didn't care. And it really affected him, I think, mentally, because he's always talking about them, and he said, oh, Philippa, my dad did this, my dad said that, it's my birthday, and they don't even care. They haven't even said hello to me. I don't know what to do. But then, for some reason, when they need help around the house or they can't do it, they call him. He's the first one they call, and he has to do all the housework, all the chores. And I think it affects him really badly, because even when he wants to talk about himself, they really don't want to hear it, because they're fearing in their head that he's going to talk about his sexual orientation and his problem he's having. And I think it really gets them agitated, and they just don't want to hear it, so they normally shut him off. So after he's finished, he has to leave the house, and he goes home, and then he'll call me to come over and socialize, which I do because I like socializing. He's a fun guy. But I can see where the discrimination comes in Black families, especially with their cultures, as they believe if you are gay, you have the devil inside of you, you need to be changed. And I think they do. His stepmom is Christian, and I think they did try to change him at one point. And he was laughing at the time. So, Philip, I'd just been to church, and the pastor was praying over me, and this was happening, and it was that. And I actually laughed as well, because I'm thinking they really think this is actually going to work. That's how they think. But in a way, I think that these are Christians, that they should know to accept people for who they are, but they don't know how to do that.
Come on, trigger warning.
Yeah.
Trigger warning. Throwing that out there for the
And they're going to church, and they're talking about God and love, but they don't know how to show love to even their own blood relatives. So to me, I think there's a big hypocrisy there. And I think, in a way, I think they're ignorant, and sometimes I think they know they're wrong, but it's because of old traditions and the way they've been brought up. They'll feel like they need to keep pushing it just to show that, you know, they're adults and they know what's right and what's wrong, and they literally just push their wrong morals onto you, when in a way they're even suffering themselves. They don't even know how to handle their own relationships or own social gatherings, but they concentrate on you because obviously it's ignorance is bliss. Am I correct?
Oh,
so yeah. So what were you going to say? Were you going to say something, J Sky?
No, I completely agree with what you said. It's a shame about your friend as well. It ties in with what I was saying before about finding the value in yourself, because if his family are quick to call him round to do things like the housework, but then when it comes to things for him, they don't want to know, or they don't want to engage in that part of his life, it probably gets to a point where he'll have to make a decision whether or not he wants to continue to allow the relationship to be as it is. Because when you find the value in yourself, you'll start to find the value in your time and realize that actually you don't need to be around people that make you feel a certain way, even if they are your family. No one deserves to be made to feel that way. It sounds like there's a lot of escapism going on at the moment with the drugs and the drink, and not, in fact, using them for what they're intended to be. Like when he's drinking, it should be a celebration and not to escape the mindset of what he's got to deal with. It sounds like you're a fantastic friend and an ally for him, and you're in a very difficult position, but if you can find a way to get him to do things for him, and maybe get him to a place where he's comfortable enough to either speak to his family on a level, or make the decision not to spend as much time around his family so that it doesn't affect him in that way, that'd be really, really good. But it is a shame that people who are religious sometimes do push these ideologies that are actually in line with religion, because religion is about love and acceptance of all people. And a lot of the time when people are pushing narratives whereby it's oppressing someone who is different to them, it's because they've grown up in a way that they don't want to leave that mentality behind, or also they've got problems in their own life and they're fearful or they're unhappy. Because if you are happy and you are accepting of yourself, then you've got no qualms with anybody else. Let's be real. Happy people don't attack other people or try to change other people. And I think one of the great things about the lockdown has been that we've been forced to look at our own behaviour and the people we interact with and question what works and what doesn't, because everything's being magnified now. We're engaging with social media a lot more, and people are starting to call out attitudes and behaviours that don't work, that haven't worked for a long time. And we're seeing a lot of big change. But on a fundamental individual level, we can also look at how we are contributing to the lives that we lead, and hopefully things like this Zoom conversation will spark something in anyone that's listening to start making better, well-informed decisions about their life.
Oh, that's a great answer. I do agree with everything you have said. As me with the friend and his mom and his dad, I don't really engage in a lot of conversations with them because I have a time where I can get a little bit too mouthy. So I'd rather just keep the peace with them, as long as, you know, if he's around there, I know I can go and visit him instead of them saying, no, Philippa cannot come on here, she's too feisty or whatever, you know. So I try to keep the peace, but I do try my best to be there as much as I can for him, in case if he wants to come around and chill and just be himself. Even though my mother is a Jamaican, she's a real Jamaican, and coming over here, she's actually learned and she's knowledgeable around the QTIPOC communities, and it doesn't bother her. She doesn't care. She thinks, she's fine with my friend. She accepts him for who he is. She doesn't ask any questions. She just treats him normally. So I think with my mother, I think that if my mother can do it, I think a lot of families can do it as well. The fact that she comes from a country that's, homophobic, and she's come over here and she's completely changed. Her mindset is changed. She doesn't ask. She doesn't discriminate. She doesn't treat anybody differently. So I think there's a lot that can be done with the mothers of the Black and Asian communities and fathers. There's a lot that can be done, but I think that's another time for another conversation and how we can actually do that. So, okay, so thank you everybody that has joined me today. I noticed that we've had some comments. This is from Charlotte, who says both Beyonce and Serena Williams had complications and complaints about treatment during labor and pregnancy. So even with that much fame and fortune, still cannot be confident. I didn't know that, but that is very good to actually acknowledge that. I didn't know that Beyonce and Serena had problems with racism in the health sector. That's something I probably need to go and read upon myself. Okay, and that is a great session. Thank you.
I'm just wondering, I sort of want to respond to some of the feedback that we had. People wondering, why not just talk about minority stress? Why have you guys got to always make it QTIPOC? And I thought to myself, that's a really important question, but I also see that as quite an important opportunity to highlight, the importance of dealing sort of with QTIPOC issues separately, and that's because a lot of times we see services for minorities or people of colour, we see services for LGBT people, but very rarely do we see services that are geared for that overlap and that intersection of those two things. And there is an assumption that because you're a person of colour and you might identify as queer, that you are automatically accepted by your community. And actually we know that quite the opposite is true. And of course people also assume that, well, you're not part of our community as far as being a person of colour, but you want to do the LGBT thing, go over there and be with those LGBT people over there. And the assumption then again is that we can just walks into sort of LGBT spaces and it's just one big festival, when really we know that that is another sort of kettle of fish that opens up itself and becomes another issue for queer, trans, intersex people of colour. And then where does that leave people? It leaves people quite abandoned. It leaves people quite, their needs are not considered, certainly not being part of the research. We know that in order for sort of policy and things to be put in place to protect our communities and to ensure we have sort of provision, it has to be in the evidence. Everything's all about evidence-based practice. And a lot of times, we don't even get a chance to be a part of the evidence. And so one of my big things is saying, make sure to become a part of the evidence base. Don't let research and surveys pass you by and you say like, oh, I haven't got time to fill them in. We have to become a part of the evidence base, because otherwise we're allowing other people to make decisions about what we do without actually asking or consulting with us. And therefore that leads to poorer health outcomes and health inequalities and all the things that we fight against at Black Beetle Health, really. So, that's something I wanted to sort of respond to for whoever might watch, sort of be here now or watch this after the fact, is that QTIPOC minority stress is its own thing. And I saw someone mention intersectionality just now. I almost hate to highlight that word, because some people have different feelings about the word intersectionality. But intersectionality is the word that I'm going to select, because I think that a lot of people know what that is. And that can come in any form. I think all of us on this call, both those are visible and those that are not visible, will have our own experience of intersectionality and what that means to us because of the different factors that we bring together, whether you're female presenting or male presenting, or you might be from an Afro-Caribbean background or an African, background. But, these are all different things. And that is for another event, for another day, really, the difference between all the different subgroups within the definition of Black and all the different subgroups within the definition of Asian, because it just, I think it's very poorly understood, and we have to put ourselves in positions to talk about it. So, I just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you, Harvey. That is Harvey Kennedy. He's the CEO and director of Black Beetle Health. And is there any other questions? Would anyone like to ask any questions? Adelaide, do you have anything to add?
I've always got something to add, Philippa. I was just thinking that how important it is as Black professionals, or the people that are kind of sat here on this panel, about how we do take ourselves into our work. And I think one of the things that was really clear for me when I started to think about my identity and how that influences my work was that I was trained to fit into the system, and the system is Eurocentric and it's heteronormative and cisnormative. And actually just when we have those opportunities, just gently challenging, just letting people know, that we work alongside, that not everybody has the same perspective as you, not everybody experiences things in the same way as you. And I know that for those of you that have done further study, masters and doctorates and stuff like that, that is what you're doing. And I really applaud you, because we're so evidence, but everything is evidence-based. We can't pretend that evidence is objective, because it is always informed by the person that has, carried out the research. But actually, if we're having voices, we're at the table conducting research, reviewing what's out there, we can identify the gaps and do something more about it. And I think particularly in my sector, it's taken quite a long time for anything to kind of happen. We've had these statistics about, Black women dying in higher numbers, and the report comes out and they're still there, the numbers are still there, but it's only just recently that the RCOGs, the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, have actually set up a working group to look into the reasons why, because at the moment we can only say that this is happening, and based on our other information we can guess that a lot of that is based is potentially influenced by unconscious bias and institutional racism and the systems that are set up. But there is nothing backing that up. So we can only guess based on the other information that those are the reasons. And so we just need to do more. So I just encourage anybody that has an interest, wherever you are, whatever sector you're working in, do something, get out there, make yourself known. If you want to do further study, when you're thinking about what you're going to write your thesis on, do it about something that's personal, that's connected to you, connected to your community, because it really does help other people.
Okay, thank you. And
And I'm wondering also, you know, I think we talk a lot about what the issue is, but I'm wondering if some of our sort of counsellor people or psychological wellbeing people, Lewis, if you can provide us with like some solutions. You know, I think a lot of times we can talk about what we know, but what do we do about this particularly during this time? I'm wondering.
Should I go first?
Sorry, could you repeat? Can you repeat that, Harvey? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you have any solutions for what we can be doing during this time to handle minority stress and just stress and high levels of cortisol, which you know, have negative effects on the body, which is another conversation. But I'm wondering about solutions. What solutions are there for this?
Yeah, I think I can only share by personal experience, and I think for me, when I'm stressed, I always try and do things that I enjoy. I always try my best to exercise, take a moment to myself, ring my friends, try and get, sometimes we can be our own worst enemy, and we can just, I call it washing machine head. Things go round and round in our heads. And sometimes when we vocalize that to other people, get a different perspective on it, it helps, and it definitely helps me as well. But yeah, I definitely encourage people as well to just have therapy as well if you need it, because I don't know, I had therapy myself when I was younger, and it definitely changed my life. So I wasn't able to, I don't feel comfortable to talk with my family about some of the stresses that I was going through, but when I spoke to someone outside of that, you know, it was quite liberating. So yeah.
Louis, Alexander, tell me, do you think because everyone's different, you have Black and Asian, you have different types of Asians, you have South, you have Pakistani, Afghanistan, Indian, Hindu, Bangladeshi, then you have the Black side where you have Black African, then you have Black Caribbean. Do you think there's a development in cultural counseling, as in to try and meet people's different needs? Because we all have different needs and we all have different cultures. Do you know ways in how to meet and understand their point of view from where they come from as their background? Is there any development in that happening at the moment, or you don't know?
Is that a Lewis A question
No, that's
or
Louis Alexander.
Lewis Neil's question?
Louis Alexander.
Yeah. Do you know what? I mean, I did see something on, what was it, the news about having counsellors of colour assisting those in minorities, and especially there's a lack of Black men in the profession, and that needs to and this is why I'm here, you know. There definitely needs to be a bit more people of colour assisting those in minorities, because, you know, when you go to I'm not going to say, when you go to a counsellor and you want to talk about cultural issues and things like that, you know, you want to be understood, you want to be heard. You don't want a counsellor or a therapist to be telling you, you know, it's all in your head or whatever. But I think we've got a long way to go in terms of understanding different cultural perspectives on things and how we see the world, because, you know, yeah. But I don't have any solutions in how we make that better.
Okay.
I just guess we need more diversity in the mental health professions.
Okay, thank you. And unfortunately, this is the time where we're going to end things. Thank you, everybody, for participating and who decided to join us today. We really appreciate it. I hope that we've taken in what has been said today and to go back and reflect on how we can help the QTIPOC community, people of color and people of queer communities, to help and come together to make things better for each and every one of us, to improve our psychological health and well-being.